This is version 1.0 of our 2025 rookie rankings. And what you should take away from this is that these are super early. It's going to change a ton. We'll probably look back at this and laugh, but College Football 25 just came out. And so all of these guys are in the game, and all of these guys have ratings, some of them which I'll mention in the video. But everybody's talking about college prospects right now. So why don't we look at the guys that people are now playing finally after 11 long years that are going to be in our dynasty teams next year as well. Let's start with the S tier. The only guy I'm really comfortable putting in the S tier is Luther Burden. I think that there are a ton of good running backs in this class. I think that there are some fairly solid quarterbacks as well, although not near as good as this last year. I don't really know about the tight end class, but in terms of receivers, Tet McMillan is really good as well. I haven't seen enough of him being projected like top 10 as I have Luther Burden potentially being projected top 10. And so with Luther Burden, this is more just he's in this tier by himself because I'm most comfortable with him. Obviously, a super high pedigree guy from the time he came out of high school when he was the number one receiver in the nation coming out of high school, going to Mizzou and performing there. He looks the part. I don't think there's going to be a lot that potentially changes that this year. I'd expect him to be a top 3 pick easily, probably top 2 lock for the Dynasty Rookie Draft for 2025. So, and then after this, it kind of becomes like, this is what do we do with all these guys?
Big tier of we don't know for sure, and some of these guys may even go back for 2025 because of all the NIL stuff. I'm sure it's going to happen with some of these guys, but Carson Beck will be at the top of the A tier here. Again, these are super flex rankings because that's the standard for all of our rookie rankings in Dynasty Fantasy Football. But with Carson Beck, he finally got his chance in Georgia after Stetson Bennett had his illustrious 12-year career for the Georgia Bulldogs, and he went out there and had 302 completions on 417 attempts, 3,900 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions, with an overall rating of like 167.9, which is pretty solid. So I think with Carson Beck, you saw a lot of really good production and really good potential upside at the quarterback position for him if he could continue to develop his tools as a passer in Georgia's offense. I know he's always going to have the knock of, well, he's on the best team in the nation every single year, and they're always going to be a contender, and they always have the best defense, and they always have the best weapons. I mean, yeah, that's true, but it's not like we haven't seen successful quarterbacks come from those situations before. You're going to hear that talk. You're going to hear that buzz. I would not be shocked if Carson Beck is, up there in the Heisman candidate odds going into 2024 for sure. Like, I think he's, I mean, he has the upside to be the number 1 overall pick if he has a very successful year.
Yeah, he not only has the upside. I mean, when you're looking at the betting odds right now, it's Carson Beck and Shedeur Sanders that are the 2 top favorites on every sports book to go number 1 as of right now. Obviously, that's going to change.
That's going to change because
but it tells you
the quarterbacks.
And I've seen Carson Beck in a fair amount of look aheads to next year's draft be mentioned as one of the top prospects as well.
He looks real solid.
Yeah, as well as Shedeur Sanders here, and Shedeur Sanders is a guy that obviously is in the spotlight a lot. I am a grumpy old guy who doesn't necessarily care for the antics nor the philosophies of the Sanders family. But with that being said, he's clearly talented. He's clearly athletic. And he's clearly going to get some kind of NFL draft boost because he is a Sanders, because he's Deion's kid. And that not only comes in the NFL, it comes with Dynasty as well. You know that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter's probably going. He's not on this list because he's probably going to be a cornerback. That's where he should be. But Shedeur Sanders, especially, if he comes into the NFL and is drafted in the first round, he's going to be given the leash of all leashes for Dynasty players. They will let him do anything before they drop his value.
So you tack on top of that the fact that he has rushing upside, his ability to move around and outside of the pocket and escape pressure. Like, there's just so many attractive things about him as a fantasy asset on top of the name, like you said. But even the name right now, there are plenty of people in the Dynasty community, like other content creators and stuff, that are super low on Shedeur Sanders and are not ranking him very high. And we're not even especially high on Shedeur Sanders.
Like Shedeur Sanders.
It's just like we're kind of being realistic with the value of quarterbacks right now in this day and age, and we would assume, just like any other year, next year there's going to be a demand at the quarterback position in the NFL, and someone's going to want to bite on that. Someone's going to want to bite on that athletic upside, and what he showcased in honestly a pretty bad, lackluster offense with a terrible offensive line last year at Colorado was pretty impressive, and his arm is definitely pretty dang solid. He's got really good arm strength. So Ted McMillan is going to be our next guy here. And I think with him, like Avery already alluded to him when we talked about our first guy in the S tier and Luther Burden, but Ted McMillan is coming out of Arizona. And he is someone who's been on the rise, I think, because of, obviously his 1,400-yard season last year with 10 touchdowns and on 90 receptions, so like 15.6 yards per reception. This is just a guy whose production has elevated his stock and expected draft stock in heading into 2025. And I think it's well-deserved, well-earned. I think he's shown a really, really solid amount of just upside as a route runner. Obviously, the opportunity has been there. And obviously playing alongside other talents who were drafted at the NFL level as well, and guys like Jacob Cowing, who was there for a while, very experienced and had plenty of production. He was able to, pretty much go into there as a sophomore and steal the job.
Yeah.
Even 700 yards as a true freshman. That was really impressive too. So keep an eye on Ted McMillan. There's going to be a lot of eyes on him for sure in 2024 and going into the draft next year in 25.
So now we move into the running back class, and the running back class for next year has been highly touted as one of the best class. Blah blah. Yeah, look, we don't know, but what we do know is there's a lot of talent in this class. Whether or not it will come to fruition is TBD, but the top of the list here for us in terms of running backs, we're going to have two guys here. I'm going to start with Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon has been in the news recently because he was arrested, and then because Mike Gundy said something stupid about him driving drunk or something like that, and so he's been, the center of attention here for the past couple of weeks in a not very good way, but he's a very talented running back. In fact, Ollie Gordon, we talk about College Football 25, is the highest rated player in College Football 25, 96 overall. Obviously out of Oklahoma State and playing in that offense. He's a guy that next year I think has first round upside in terms of draft capital. But again, it's going to kind of be up to these running backs this year, him, some of the other guys we're going to mention after him, to sort out who the running back one is and then who falls behind. But I do think Ollie Gordon is one of the better talents as a running back in this class. And I think Ashton Jeanty is as well. I think that both of these guys have a ton of potential. I think both of these guys can make a good case for the running back one. I think there's also a decent chance that neither of these guys are going to be the running back one next year. It just depends. But with Ashton Jeanty, 1,350 yards, 6 yards per carry last year at Boise State. He had 14 touchdowns, not to mention he had 43 receptions for 570 yards, 13 yards per reception. We talk about that a lot when we're scouting prospects. This is a guy that often, in terms of what we're looking for out of running back prospects, he checks off a lot of boxes. We have our eye on him for a number of reasons, but his receiving upside is the main one. He could come in, he could be drafted in the first round because he would fit that specific role for an NFL team, and then his skill set would immediately translate to the NFL. So there are a lot of reasons to be high on him, but these two guys are going to be kind of the top of our running back class, and these guys, they're on the same tier as anybody in the A tier. You could put them up as high as Carson Beck, and you could put them as low as the bottom of this tier. But in terms of, the very talented running back class, I think these are the two guys that most people are talking about right now in terms of being at the top. So
yeah, Evan Stewart is going to be at the top of the B tier here, and he has not had a lot of production the first couple years of his career in college. 53 receptions as a freshman, 649 yards, 38 receptions his sophomore year in 2023 for 514 yards. So not a ton on the production side there, but I think the talent is there, and it is very apparent to a point where we are ranking him. He's getting plenty of recognition where we are going to rank him here at the top of the B tier as well.
Yeah.
And then Emeka Egbuka. Everyone knows who Emeka Egbuka is. Everyone knows. I mean, we were ranking him pretty high before he decided that he was going to come back to Ohio State. Even in the class of 2024, as loaded as it was, we were super high on him and his talent. He struggled with some injury in 2023, which I think was part of the reason why he decided to come back, because he was starting to be mocked pretty consistently in the second round instead of the first, which, from a financial perspective, you'd prefer to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. So with Egbuka, he has one more year to really prove himself that he's worthy of going in the first round of the NFL draft. I think he has that upside still, even though we're ranking him here in the B tier. There's just always a constant inflow of wide receiver talent being injected into the Ohio State offense every single year. So there's always a chance that someone's going to be elevated and maybe overtake Egbuka, but I think seniority is going to show out here in this season for the Ohio State Buckeyes, and I think Emeka Egbuka is going to be the guy, and I think he is going to be a big name heading into the 2025 rookie draft.
Yeah, and let's talk some quarterback here. So let's talk Jalen Milroe. I put him on this list specifically because I think not a lot of people are giving him the chance that he deserves in terms of what he could end up being for dynasty players. This is a guy that obviously has a ton of of holes in his game, especially passing the ball. And I'll be the first to acknowledge that. Watching Jalen Miller last year, it was very clear that he has severe limitations in his game, especially as a passer. With that being said, he is a guy that possesses a fair amount of rushing upside. 161 carries last year for 531 yards on the ground and 12 touchdowns. What I will say to those who would say there's no way Jalen Milroe is going to be anywhere close to the first round, we have seen quarterbacks that have been less polished than Jalen Milroe get drafted in the first round in recent years because of their athletic profile and because of their rushing upside. And when that happens, it's typically a good idea to take shots on those guys in Dynasty as well, because rushing upside raises your floor so much that you end up with a very high value floor as well, to where even if somebody is a bad passer in the NFL, you still see them hold a lot of Dynasty value. And so with that being said, Jalen Milroe, he needs to get better in a lot of areas of his game, a ton of areas in his game. Although last year at Alabama, he had a 65% completion percentage. That's pretty good. 2,800 yards last year. He threw for 23 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. So while I'll acknowledge that he has had his limitations, he's definitely not somebody that I think is way too bad to even sniff the first round.
Well, this is a guy that in his first year of starting to also showcase that he could really take that pressure and take that job. When he started really slow to begin the season, when they lost to Texas, they even benched him for a week to test, the guys behind him. And he went back and he got his hands dirty and he worked hard and he got the job back quickly and got better and better as the season progressed. We want to continue to see that progression in a new offense now, which is the Washington offense, where we've seen a guy like Michael Penix go top 10 in the NFL draft. I think you could, in theory, see that development from Jalen Milroe. Don't be shocked if he decides to stay for one extra year to continue to develop his skills, because, you can make a ton of money in college now, but that's a guy that you want to keep an eye on for next year's class. If he comes out, there's going to be a lot of buzz around him for sure.
Yeah, and then Quinn Ewers. And Quinn Ewers is one of the most controversial college football players out there because a lot of people swear by him as a prospect. Obviously, he was the highest rated high school prospect in the history of them rating prospects. Went to Ohio State, didn't even make it really on the field, and then went to Texas, and now, he's there. And last year, he threw for 3,500 yards and 22 touchdowns and 6 interceptions on 69% completion percentage.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a nice statistic, that 69%.
It is nice.
And I think he's very controversial because a lot of people like Jalen Milroe, but in different ways, think that he's severely limited in his game. A lot of people think he's overrated, straight up. I think that he's going to have first-round potential this year, and so I think he has to be on our radar because of that. So yeah,
Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson are going to be back-to-back here,
Boom.
And I think that tells you what we think about both of those guys. It's on purpose. We don't know what the frick's going to happen there. I think ideally it's going to be a 50-50 split, and they're both going to be effective, both going to be efficient, because it's just fresh legs after fresh legs after fresh legs every single play. And with Judkins, those of you who don't know about him, I think there's been a lot of hype around him transferring to Ohio State because he was very successful at Ole Miss as a true freshman. 1,500 yards off of 274 carries, 5.7 yards per carry, ton of touchdowns, had some pretty decent receiving upside as well, 8.8 yards per reception. And then his efficiency went way down in 2023 with 4.3 yards per carry, only 1,100 yards, more receptions there. But I mean, all of his efficiency metrics went down, and Ole Miss as a whole was just not great. So he goes to a better situation in Ohio State where he can be potentially, in theory, more successful and more efficient and showcase his skills in a more effective way by playing alongside another running back who's going to get a decent amount of volume as well. And I think that's something where, you could look at that being a concern for Judkins going into the NFL when he's inevitably drafted at some point. Maybe he's going to go into a room where he's kind of splitting carries. But we're seeing that more and more often in the NFL, where you can split carries with another running back in the same backfield and still be productive if you're, a super high-level prospect. See Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, case in point. Now, some would say that would be the outlier situation, but again, keep an eye on this and see what Judkins could do. And maybe, maybe TreVeyon Henderson disappoints. Maybe he ends up, just not being as effective as we thought he could be in his fourth year. Henderson was a guy that a lot of people were high on. He was a running back 1 in the 2024 class, and I was not as high on him. I don't know about you. I liked Brooks more than Henderson. So I think that there's a good chance that Judkins could end up being the guy at Ohio State. That being said, we're not going to take a huge shot here. We're going to rank him back to back because honestly, either one of those guys
the best
could be
man
the top
win,
one. Yeah.
Right? Let's go to the seats here. I'm going to put a tight end in here and put Colston Loveland in here. I think there are a lot of running backs with higher upside than him. I think Nick Singleton, I think Amari Hampton are guys that you could easily slide up in this tier. In fact, I wouldn't mind. Let's put Colston Loveland at the end of this tier. Colston Loveland, my bad. But he's a guy last year as a sophomore at Michigan. Actually, yeah, as a sophomore. He had 650 yards and 4 touchdowns on 45 receptions in that national championship Michigan team. That's pretty good for a tight end in college. Like that's good. That's good production. When you're looking at his overall profile, he's 6'5", 245 pounds, which is almost the exact median of what you see the size of a successful NFL tight end is. So he has the size, he's got the production metrics, he's playing at a Power 5 school. So in terms of, the tight end class next year, he's the only tight end we have on here because he's really the only one like super on my radar right now. But I think he could be good as well. I'll just go through this whole tier and you can get the next tier. Jackson Dart is going to be on this list as well. And honestly, this is, again, when you're playing in Superflex leagues, you need to be able to put quarterbacks up here, even if you have no idea how they're going to do. Jackson Dart, we talked about QBs with questions, plenty of questions, but plays for Ole Miss, plays in that offense we talked about. Last year, he had 65% completion percentage, 3,300 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. So again, looked fairly good last year from a production standpoint, but he's a quarterback. If he's going to get any conversation about being in the first round, then we need to be pretty open about the possibility that he will be a top 12 to 15 pick, especially, Bo Nix is case in point of that this year, right?
Yeah.
He is case and point. Let's talk about Nicholas Singleton now. So, again, very talented running back class. He plays for Penn State. Last year, he had 750 yards and 8 touchdowns. The year before that, he had 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. And so, again, when you're looking at this running back class top to bottom, this is another guy that I think could have top 12 potential in terms of Dynasty Superflex rookie drafts next year. I think so. I also think Amari Hampton is one of those guys as well. And again, it's more of just, I think these guys are going to separate themselves in the season, but obviously Hampton playing for USC last year, 250 carries and 1,500 yards on 15 touchdowns, not to mention 29 receptions for 222 yards. And so with both of these guys, I think this is just kind of our next tier of like these running backs could be really, really good. Singleton also had 26 receptions for 300 yards. It's 11.8 yards per reception. So again, they're guys that both like I think they have a lot to prove this year. And whether or not they kind of take the next step up into those top tiers as the season goes on, it's going to be interesting to watch. This running back class just has so much upside, I think. So and with that being said, there's a ton of running backs here in the D's tier.
Yeah, the D's tier, we got Damian Martinez at the top of this tier. He is Oregon State's running back, coming off of a 194 carry, 1,100 yard season. That's 6.1 yards per carry. He also, his receiving upside is still technically unknown, but I just want to see more receptions. I want to see more consistency there because on 11 receptions this year, he had 11.5 yards per reception. 126 receiving yards off of 11 receptions. That's super impressive. That wasn't just from one, super huge breakaway reception where he got like 80 yards or something. That's like some legit stuff there. So he showed some promise, showed some explosiveness, not like bell cow worthy with 194 carries. I want to see that usage go up. I want to see that receiving usage go up as well. And then you're looking at his draft stock being significantly impacted as well. So I'm optimistic to see what he does at Oregon State. Devin Neal was a guy that was going to come out this year potentially, and he ended up staying, going back to Kansas, and he's had 1,000 yards and 1,200 yards respectively over the last couple of years, and his efficiency is phenomenal, 6.1, 6.3 yards per carry. The receiving upside is there as well, 8.7 yards per reception. This is the definition of consistency.
Yep.
We just, again, got to see the volume go up, got to see some more explosiveness, got to see some more, elite level running back upside talent where we could see him end up going day 2 in the NFL draft. Just got to see it one more year. And that's, obviously why he decided to go back to Kansas to begin with is they clearly, didn't love the odds going into 2024. I think he has a good chance this year if he's successful as a senior. So Trevor Etienne is going to be our next guy here. And again, kind of like Shadur Sanders. Yes, he is Travis Etienne's brother. And the name value alone, see James Cook, who did not nearly have the production profile that his brother did. Still ended up going in the second round of the NFL draft and was drafted in the late first of a lot of rookie drafts that year as well in Dynasty. I think Trevor Etienne has a chance to be productive in a much better situation. He transferred to Georgia. So if you want to watch a Carson Beck game and see how I feel about him, you're going to learn a lot about Trevor Etienne as well. He is coming off of a DUI and reckless driving accusation, I believe, allegedly. So we'll see where that goes. I hope he's not suspended or anything like that. That'd be a bummer, but that's why he's kind of lower on our list. And Nick Anderson is going to be our next guy. He is a receiver from Oklahoma. And he has not done much his first couple of years. He actually did a decent amount of sophomore year. He had 798 receiving yards, 21 yards per reception. He had 38 receptions in 2023. But again, he's going into his junior year, 6'4", 209 pounds. He's kind of a big body guy. You would assume a guy that's lined up on the outside that's a deep threat given his yards per reception. There's some upside there for sure. And then Tez Johnson, he's kind of the last man available at Oregon. He is going into his 5th year, so he's going to have to be pretty productive and at the top of his game if he's going to get really, really good draft capital. I mean, we saw with Xavier Leggett, who never had production before his 5th year and was drafted in the first round. Correct. So there's a chance there. There is an opportunity for him to be successful and get some good NFL draft capital. 1,100 yards his senior year, 800 yards the year before that, 700 yards his sophomore year. So always consistent production there. Had 1,100 yards, obviously, alongside Troy Franklin. He's just got to be the guy at Oregon, and he's got to prove that he can be a valuable asset for an NFL team.
And in the F tier here, we're going to have two guys that you're familiar with. Raheem Sanders. I remember there was a day where everybody in the Devy community was Raheem Rocket Sanders. He's the next blah, blah. He sucked last year. He was really bad. Yeah. But the year before that, he had 1,400 yards, averaged 6.5 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. He's also showcased not a ton of receiving upside in college.
What's his efficiency?
Good. 10 yards, 7.5 yards per reception, but again, only 11, 28, and 10 receptions.
Yeah.
So we got to see a larger sample size than that. With that being said, I think we're just putting him on here thinking like, okay, maybe the talent surfaces again, and we see Raheem Sanders become what we thought he could. And then Drew Aller, I think it's Aller. Every time I read his name, I don't know how to say it, but plays at Penn State. I should know because they play IU every year, but again, with a quarterback in a Superflex league, we're going to throw him on there just because we think it could be something where he could get late first, early second. Again, you just never know with quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. So, and this year proved that. So, the one thing you definitely need to take away from this video is that we really don't have any idea where these guys are going to end up being ranked. This is more speculation. Have fun, talk about college football players because it's popular right now, and less of this is how you should rank these players because we don't freaking know. I mean, I did a lot of research trying to figure out how I wanted to rank these guys. I know of almost every single one of these guys. I just didn't know like, okay, what are their actual like NFL draft? What if they're NFL draft prospects? Like I just don't know. But with that being said, make sure you drop a like on the video because why wouldn't you? And make sure if you play Dynasty, you subscribe. And also make sure if you play Dynasty and you have a Dynasty team and that Dynasty team needs direction, that Dynasty team is a team that you want to win your league with, make sure you get a team blueprint at flockfantasy.com/domain. The link is in the description to buy a blueprint. You also get one free with the annual Mother Flocker tier. When you use code domain, you get the trade calculator, which will be very handy during the season. You get our My Teams, you get our rankings, which are going to be very important going into August. So you get all that. Annual tier, code domain, flockfantasy.com/domain. Both the links to those are in the description, but check those out if you're interested in that. Appreciate you guys so much, and we'll see you later.